Be they stalwart protectors clad in plate, powerful druids shapeshifted into towering bears, elusive monks, or mighty demon hunters, the tank is the character that protects their friends. But how do you tank? Well, let me show you. Hello there and welcome to the Tanking Guide. Over this series of videos we'll discuss everything you need to know to become a master tank. In the last lesson we learned all about situational awareness, seeing what's going on around you and making sure you stay on top of the situation. However, I'd like to spend a little bit of time demonstrating to you just what situational awareness is. So, for this video, we're going to do another exercise. The footage on screen is going to be of my warrior tanking the time-walking version of the Halls of Lightning heroic mode. As we go through this dungeon, we'll look at examples of situational awareness in action. When this image appears on screen, the footage will freeze and you will have a few seconds to identify a potential danger. Depending upon how confident you are with tanking and evaluating situations, you may feel free to pause the video at any time to take a little bit of time to have a look at exactly what any specific situation is and what the danger is. Now, there's no scoring system at work here, it's more to give you some practical demonstrations as to how situational awareness can be applied. Now, let's get started. The healer is missing. Now, he actually disconnects from the game shortly after I notice this, so we have to sit around and wait for another one. However, had I not noticed this and just started attacking enemies, there is a very high chance I would have died. This platform actually has multiple paths, and I do not know what is going on behind me. As soon as I realize this, I swivel my camera around and notice an enemy moving dangerously close to the group. So I actually attack them before they have a chance to potentially run past me for the healer or one of the damage dealers. In the background here, I notice the boss slowly moving towards the trash pack that I want to kill next. However, you'll also notice the arcs of lightning coming from the boss. This means he will increase the damage of anything nearby. If we were to attack that trash pack, the boss would reach us before we could kill it. That would be a deadly situation, so I want to avoid it. Instead, I decide to pull the Stormforged Mender in front of me and the Stormforged Tactician on the other platform in preparation for a little plan I'm putting together. As the boss moves into range, despite the fact that we're still fighting trash, I attack him. I do this preemptively so that he goes around the apex of the corner, not through the trash pack, which would also aggro the trash pack and likely kill us. Instead, now we are only fighting the boss and his ads as opposed to the boss and the trash. This avoids a potentially deadly situation. The healer has rushed ahead, signaling his intent to get this dungeon done as quickly as possible. Now, this is very common behavior within pickup groups or pugs, so I have to think exactly how I'm going to handle this next trash pack. It consists of small enemies that explode when they die. There are two techniques you can do here. You can either kill them slowly one at a time as you make your way through the room, or you can gather them all up quickly and then kill them all at the same time, which is much more dangerous. However, judging entirely upon the behavior of the healer here, he is likely going to run ahead regardless of whether I choose to or not. So this influences my decision to move through this next room fast as opposed to slowly. This one is fairly obvious. As I said, these enemies explode when they die, so it's important that I don't get hit by all of them, otherwise I may be in danger. So I stun them with an area of effect stun, my shockwave ability, and then I just step away to let the DPS kill them off so I am safe. There are a couple of minor threats here, like I'm not entirely sure where the enemies are, but I have pretty good knowledge of this particular instance, so I know around about where they are, so I know that the group is safe for now. However, more importantly, I have a debuff. I mouse over it quickly and notice that it is a huge reduction to my armor. This means that the next pack I pull is going to hit me extremely hard, so I have to be prepared for that. This particular threat pertains to the chat log. Now, as I'm moving forward into this area where enemies spawn behind me, I see in my chat log that the healer wants me to run all the way through this small gauntlet so that we can pull everything, about 8 or 9 enemies in total, and then kill them at the same time. However, I also know that these enemies do an AOE Fear, which makes them very dangerous, because if the healer gets controlled by the fear, I will be in danger. Unfortunately, there isn't too much I can do in this situation, because I have already begun the pulling of these enemies. What I could have done here is perhaps stop in the chat and say, no, wait, let's pull slower, I'm not confident enough. Unfortunately, thanks to the fact that the healer stated this as we began, I didn't really have the time to do so. What I could have also done is to move the enemies away from the healer so that he didn't get controlled. Unfortunately, I didn't do this, and I end up dying. Despite being battle-rezzed by the healer, I end up dying again, because during the time it takes for me to get back up and reinitialize control of the situation, the healer is dead. Unfortunately, this means that most members of the group die. I take some time in the chat log to explain how we died, and make sure not to blame anyone, because blaming anyone is not a good idea in pickup groups. I will speed up the footage now so that we can get back to where we were in a decent amount of time. As I run back to the place where I died, I notice that the rogue in the group asks the healer to heal them. Now, if they were out of combat, they would not be asking this. This suggests that perhaps they are still in combat and may have either survived or vanished and re-engaged at some point. So now, I know I need to get back extremely quickly to help control the situation. I use Heroic Leap to move forward, spot the rogue and the enemy they're fighting, and then intercept and use a taunt to gain control of the situation. At this point, I make a mistake. I do not notice that in the chat log the rogue has mentioned they are placing down a Savage Feast. If you don't know what this is a game object that is placed for about 2 or 3 minutes that allows anyone to right-click on it in order to eat food, regain health, and then get a buff to a beneficial stat. This is a very good way to increase your power. So the rogue mentions that they want to put down a Savage Feast, and then I see the emote that automatically plays when you put down the Savage Feast. Unfortunately, I did not notice this, and I did not pause. I charge forwards, while the rest of the group holds still for the Savage Feast, which means I am by myself. Fortunately, I'm not too far away, and even though the healer is sitting in the back, I'm able to keep myself alive until they come along. It's not a deadly mistake, but it is a mistake nonetheless. Ionar is about to use Dispersion. This makes her disappear and form as several little lightning bolts that will chase players. They cannot be tanked, and the only thing I can do is to run away from them. However, my situational awareness allows me to notice that she is casting Disperse, so I am able to move quickly, and I only get clipped a couple of times because I venture a little bit too close to the lightning orbs. This is a fairly simple example of situational awareness. I can see the two larger enemies patrolling towards my group. I'm going to need to pull them without pulling either of the trash packs on either side of the kind of planetarium area just in front of me. However, they will likely attack me because I am too close. Or, and this would be even worse, they would attack the melee damage dealers that are behind the enemies I'm currently tanking. So, I move the enemies backwards to force my group out of the immediate aggro range of the patrol, then I am able to attack the patrol myself. One of the Titanium Vanguards has just charged and knocked back my healer. This didn't do too much damage, however, it is indicative that it will be cast again. So I keep a careful eye on the Titanium Vanguards and prepare Vigilance, a cooldown that allows me to reduce the damage my target takes for a few moments, and then, as soon as I see the Vanguard charge towards the healer again, I use my Vigilance spell to help mitigate the damage. This would have been very important if both of these Vanguards had charged the healer at the same time, which is definitely possible. An enemy patrol has moved almost exactly on top of another trash pack, so I could attempt to pull both here, but considering the problems we had pulling too many enemies in the gauntlet area, I decided to hold back and wait. However, I have set a pace in this particular dungeon. I pull quickly and I don't really pause, as long as my healer's mana can manage it, and it can. So, at this point, I'm watching the rest of the group carefully to make sure that they pause as well. If they hadn't, I must have been prepared to jump forwards and get involved in the action, even if it means that I would have to use cooldowns or even die. It is better to jump in than to do nothing. Instead, the trash pack moves forwards, and then I grab aggro and we continue. One little note here is I actually also move these Titanium Vanguards on top of the group, because their ranged attacks, including their charge and their throw spears that you may have noticed earlier, will not be applied to enemies at range, so I force them into the center of the group so that the rest of the group doesn't get targeted by their range abilities, and so that they don't get knocked back into, say, more enemies, which would be very dangerous. You may have noticed the Stormforged Runeshapers using an ability called Charged Flurry. Now, this is very important. It deals a lot of damage. I played back in Wrath of the Lich King and I have done this stuff before, so I am aware of how hard it hits, especially on heroic mode. So, I make a note here to keep the two Runeshapers interrupted. First of all, I use a shockwave when one of them starts casting. Then, I interrupt the next one. And then, because I don't have any other really solid ways of preventing the final cast, I use Intimidating Shout to interrupt the cast and make the enemy run. Unfortunately, a running enemy is very dangerous because that could mean they could jump into another group, which could make your life very difficult. So, I make sure to hit them with damage as quickly as I can to break my own fear, because the interrupt effect has already gone off and I don't need them running around. This is an example of researching the fights ahead. If you did not know this, you could have reacted to the Charged Flurry dealing so much damage with good situational awareness of the health of your group, or you could have researched beforehand. Here, I'm thinking ahead. I see two Stormforged Giants moving back and forth in semicircular patterns around the large globe in this area. Ideally, we only want to fight one. That means I am going to need to get the attention of the giant quickly, because they are moving in an almost identical symmetrical pattern right now. So if I wait for them to patrol back towards the group, they will both be very close when I first attack them. So, I start moving. I move around to get aggro on one of the giants while they're far away. I make sure to keep an eye on my health because the healer is currently out of my line of sight. However, this forces the healer and the rest of the group to come down to the giant and me. Then I backpedal around the semicircular pattern that the giant would have used to make sure that the group is also moving with me to stay in range, so that the other giant doesn't ever get in range of the group. Then, to finish it off, I get knocked back into the boss, like a chump. You could say this was a terrible mistake, or you could say I ran forwards in order to get knocked into the boss. Either way, don't show off like this. It doesn't tend to work out too well, especially if you're not too confident. Either way, the fight with Loken begins. Now, the boss has started casting Lightning Nova. No doubt you can guess what's going to happen next. There's going to be a big pulse of damage around the boss. So I and several other members of the team back away to avoid it. However, it's very important to note that it is my responsibility to look after this group, especially my healer. So I keep an eye on my healer at all times throughout this fight, because we are going to be jumping backwards and forwards every time there is a Lightning Nova. You want to stay close to him while he is not casting Lightning Nova, because you will take less damage from his pulsing aura at that point, but then you want to run away when Lightning Nova comes along. So I keep an eye on my healer, who is going to be jumping in and out just like me, to make sure that if I ever feel like he's going to be clipped by Lightning Nova, I use a Vigilance on him so that he doesn't get killed, and we can continue to fight the boss. That will conclude this exercise on situational awareness. Hopefully you learned quite a few things, even from the stuff that I didn't particularly mention, because otherwise this would have been a super long video. Make sure you're always moving your camera, make sure you keep an eye on everything around you, and make sure that you react as quickly as you can to situations, and that you do your best to see them coming. As you can see, I know this game very well, and I made mistakes. It's common, it's easy to do, it's also easy to get wound up about. Don't let them get to you. Everyone makes mistakes. In our next lesson, we'll take some time to discuss a few helpful add-ons that will make your life much easier. Don't worry, as far as I'm aware, there's only 2 that you can really use to up your game. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or suggestions, you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I wish you the best of luck in the world of Warcraft.